Tobago, you would know that for the last how many years, I think most certainly the last 10 years or more, I would say, probably about more like 15 years, I usually follow a particular routine at the end of the year where I spend Christmas Day in Trinidad and I come to Tobago immediately after, and I spend a few days in Tobago, including New Year's, and then return to Trinidad. That has been my routine for years, and this year, 2024, was no different. A lot of planning went into that, and I ended the year on that note. I did come into Tobago on Boxing Day with my entire family, because we did have some family issues as well. And I, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, believe it or not, I do accept that responsibility for the people of Trinidad and the people of Tobago. I was in this room a few months ago, I think twice, on Tobago matters. Once had to do with the oil spill that we handled from this room. Carnival, I think it was, I ended up spending Carnival in Tobago, overseeing that matter. And the other one was when we had an unusual outbreak of violent crime here in Tobago, which has resulted in certain adjustments being made to how we manage Tobago's affairs. This is the very room and this is the very place on this occasion. But having come in here on Boxing Day, I came here also to do what I did in Trinidad, because as Prime Minister, we celebrate our national days in very many ways. And Christmas, I usually hold at the Diplomatic Center in Trinidad, a bit of a reception and invite a wide cross-section of people to come and spend, commingle and end the year in what you might call a Christmas party. Most people attend on invitation, and that has become part of the national work agenda for us at the Office of the Prime Minister. We didn't do it during the COVID years for good reason, and but this year we had a particularly good one, and we were very well mixed and represented. That happened in Trinidad, and I came to Tobago, and we had made plans for a similar event for Tobago people and all the officials in Tobago, and people of all walks of life were invited to come to the Prime Minister's residence, which we do have one in Tobago now, which can where we can host such a function. And we did have such a party. And unfortunately for me and my family, 15 minutes before that party was due, in fact, I had just started greeting people arriving there when I got the news that one of my elder brothers had passed away. So for those who couldn't figure out how you could have a party and also have someone, that's how it happened. But it went on. I never introduced my family affairs into the public business. The function went on very well, and I want to thank all those Tobagonians who took the time to come out and mix with their fellow men and women on that day. We had quite a good function here in Tobago. And maybe I shouldn't say any more about that for the moment. You might say something about it that would give me the opportunity. But so that function ended at a little later than the normal time, at 9 o'clock, a little later than that. But as you would know, information flows continuously to the Office of the Prime Minister, especially matters of national security. There's no special arrangement of daytime. We do have meetings, but at the Office of the Prime Minister, I receive information on a continuous basis. And as you would know, we have in the last few months in particular been subjected to the wiles and misbehavior of a small minority of people who call themselves, or who we call criminals, and who call themselves by various other names. But the bottom line is the action of such persons are of great interest and pose risks to all of us in Trinidad and Tobago. I speak here specifically about the escalating criminal conduct, violent crime, expressed particularly in frequent murders in Trinidad and Tobago, largely conducted by persons who operate as groups, gangs, under a kind of leadership, and from various parts of the country, all over the country, and in some cases where people seek bold enough to even want to claim territory and to exclude law enforcement from those arrangements. That is nothing new. We have been dealing with that on a daily basis for quite some time. And at the Office of the Prime Minister, I receive a continuous stream of advice as to how we should respond to that. But there are two things that are fixed in the ground. One is that we are confined to the perimeters of the law, and two, the law is enforced by specific officers of state. The actual interaction with the problem. I mean, you must have heard people criticizing or warning that the Prime Minister should not even talk to the Commissioner of Police. And of course, if you hear that the Prime Minister has instructed the Commissioner of Police to do anything, that will cause some people to have a fit. But that being so, we got information, and that information would cause a decision to evolve. You would also have heard, as the various incidents occur from day to day, week to week, we have been grappling with the whole idea of the government's response, of course, through its security agencies and other state opportunities, to this whole question of a state of emergency. Should we or should we not? We have had state of emergencies in our country before. 1990, or 1970, 1990, 2011, we've had it because the government of the day resort to that situation where it involves reducing certain rights that are afforded citizens on an ongoing basis. But because of the unusual development, the government is required on that day not to punish people, not to assume any power that the government ought not to have, because the government has that power in law to make those adjustments under specific guidelines so that the population can get the benefit of that action. So notwithstanding a lot of what you would have been hearing by people and their conspiracy theories and their political wish lists, a state of emergency is not something that any government takes lightly. And therefore, we in the government, at the cabinet and on the office of the Prime Minister, we always knew that that option was available, and it is always part of the consideration. But then, given the effect that it may have, and given the fact that our main priority is to keep our body and soul together through a thriving economy and coming out of a pandemic, even as the criminals ratchet up their misbehavior, responding to them with a state of emergency was not at the forefront of the card. We've done a number of things along the way, much of which is done in silence, not without any fanfare, because national security issues in any country, you don't keep banging drums of what you have done. As I can tell you, the last document I've just read here is quite pleasing to me because it involves a significant amount of work being done home and abroad on our Coast Guard fleet, because we need to do more with respect to protecting our borders. I never broadcast to you that we don't have this and we don't have that. Nobody does that. But we take the action to be in a position to have as many of our assets in the water as possible, or to be available on call. That's been done. We're making some significant progress on that. And you would have seen us do something like that. But we've always had the option of using a state of emergency to give the law enforcement officers, by that I mean the police in particular, that little advantage that they don't have. Because the criminals will take every advantage available to them. And in many instances, timing is of the essence. And the police will talk to the government at various times about various things. And one of the things that they talk about is that inability to move quickly when they get information, especially when lives are at risk. And the criminals and their friends know that and take advantage of it. So on the night of the 29th, given the information that was coming to me and the demonstration of the willingness of the criminal element to disregard all aspects of humanity, all aspects of good behavior, where now, if I talk to you about what happened in front of Besson Street Police Station, it's not the first time somebody has fired shots outside the police station. But that attack, planned and executed with such precision outside Besson Street Police Station, started the thought that maybe the time has come for the government to do what is available to the government as a last resort to give the police a bit more advantage against these criminal actions. I don't want to go into the detail because you in the media, you would have published the details of what happened outside Besson Street. But as a citizen, you also would have your view on that. But of course, that doesn't end there. We've had other instances, as has been pointed out by some of our detractors. We've had other instances where criminals have done things like that. But in this situation, the next expression from the criminal element was a retaliation that resulted in 5 people being killed in one location by using the same arms that was used at Besson Street. And of course, it was a clear case of retaliation, and the information reaching the office of the Prime Minister on that night and from hours before, from sources that we believe to be credible, was that this retaliatory behavior is likely, more than likely, to continue because it is one group and associates seeing themselves in physical confrontation with another group or other groups. At that time, and I could tell you the exact time, I was here in Tobago, part of the country of Trinidad and Tobago, from which I am able to function as I'm functioning now. I took the decision then to get through to the cabinet members and to indicate that the government should, at this time, move with dispatch to invoke a state of emergency based on the information and the actions with which you are living. Of course, I can't prove to you that nothing was going to happen, but I can tell you that we've taken steps to make it more difficult for it to happen and easier for the police to act. I don't know how many lives would have been saved. That is for speculators to multiply. But I can tell you the action that was available to the government from way back when, the time had come for that action to be taken. That was 10:30 on Friday night. Her Excellency the President signed and sealed the declaration on Monday, 30th December 2024 at approximately 2:30 a.m. That was the time that we received it from her office. So she would have signed it a little time before. I can tell you, to get that done at 2:30, it required me taking steps to awaken the President from her bed and awaken other officers, because putting a state of emergency in place is not just flicking a switch or saying that Prime Minister says you have a state of emergency. It is pretty much an operation because it involves a number of things being done at that moment and in sequence. The Emergency Powers 2024 were published by the Gazette on Monday, the 30th December 2024 at approximately 9:28 p.m. We sent it to Her Excellency the President at 1:37 p.m. that day, after the Cabinet had approved the same, and thereafter it was the public servants at the Office of the President the CPC, which is the Chief Parliamentary Council, and the government printery, who went through their processes, writing them until publication at 9:28 p.m. The process was started, and it continued in the normal scheme of things. The acting Chief Justice, and it had to be the acting Chief Justice because the substantive Chief Justice was out of the country, the same way the Attorney General is out of the country. It was Christmas time, so that is not anything unusual or untoward. But when these officers, like myself, out of the country, somebody acts, that person has virtual full powers to continue. So the acting Chief Justice appointed the members of the tribunal on Wednesday, the 1st of January 2025. Of course, from the ill-informed, you will see in today's papers somebody saying that as part of the mess that the government has made, that no tribunal has been put in place and no regulations. But I will ask you citizens to disregard those kinds of comments coming from ill-informed or malicious sources. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is a serious operation, and we take your business seriously. So the tribunal has been in place since January 1st, and the appointment of the tribunal was gazetted on January 2nd, 2025. So between the decision made 10:30 on the night of the 29th to the 2nd of January, all these operations have put in place a state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, in putting this in place and doing the regulations to effect it, a state of emergency is like you target certain things. What are you responding to? In 1990 or 1970, it was responding to marches and mobilization and that sort of thing. So the state of emergency specifically dealt with those aspects of things. In COVID, we were responding to a medical emergency, health care. We've targeted our emergency to treat with that. And, you know, it's like the same thing here now. It's targeted to treat with the focus on the behavior of people who are engaging in gang warfare and the threat to the public, killing the public and killing members of the gangs. That's what that wounding and killing. That's what it was. And that's why in this state of emergency, as we thought it through, and also wanting to preserve the health of the economy, as we have done all along, by not going down that road, because we were always concerned about the negative side of the state of emergency. When on this occasion we decided we have to use it, we sought also then to protect both the public interests by not putting the public under any curfew, because we do not believe that a curfew adds much more. Because the real authority we want is to give the police the authority to act, and to act swiftly without the warranting process, and to do certain things which otherwise they could not have done, right, in the time frame within which they want to do it. And of course, we did not interfere with people's rights, to this law-abiding citizens' right to assemble and to conduct your normal business. That is how this state of emergency is different to others. So, of course, on matters of this nature, in a population of 1.4 million people, you might get a million different points of view as to what is correct. But none of us have any crystal ball that says if you look in the crystal ball, you see exactly the equation that 2 and 2 equals 4. But we anticipate by reasonable action that we'll get a reasonable result. And we understand that there would be disappointments in some quarter, or disagreements in some quarter. And of course, the I told you so is also available, and then, it should have been done before. But we use other options. And one of the things I did along the way as we moved to this point was to strengthen the ability of the ministerial side of working with the police. And we added a minister to the Ministry of National Security. We took a number of steps intra that ministry, and we sought help externally where help was required, and we have been using every other option to try to avoid interfering with your rights in an emergency, or threatening the economy. One of the points I want to make today is this. A state of emergency, especially one with a curfew, has an extraordinary effect on small and medium-sized businesses in particular. Big businesses invariably work from 8 to 4. During the period 8 to 4, broad daylight, they can conduct their business, whatever it is, or most of it, and not be affected. Even their employees can get home after 4 o'clock by a curfew. A lot of medium and small business, especially small business, exist in that twilight zone from 4 to 11. So a curfew literally shuts them down. And the government has been mindful of that all along. Entertainment. If you have a curfew, you kill off that part of the economy. Especially at this time where our oil and gas revenues are not what they are hoped to be in some instances. We are on the lower side of the scale of that. We are relying very heavily on the performance of the non-oil sector. So the government has been reluctant to let the behavior of a small handful of people damage the wider livelihood. So at the end of the day, it is a choice you have to make, because government decisions are always about priorities, because there are always options. Always options. So as we do that, we now end up where we are today. I just want to point out to the population, this disease of criminal conduct is not one that we all spread, but we all can be infected by it. 1.3 million people. If 10% of the population is involved in criminal conduct, right? That's 130,000 people. If 1% is involved, that's 10,300 people. And if 0.1% is involved, it's a fraction of the population, but it's a couple thousand people. But you could imagine 2,000 criminals running around the country with guns trying to kill everybody. That is what creates the problem for this country. Proportionately, a small number of people doing the most antisocial of human actions, killing other human beings, or taking action against other human beings, which could result in killing, and they don't care. That's what we're dealing with. Some people would see that as the fault of Mr. X or Miss Y, but it would be a tragedy indeed if we as a population confine ourselves to seeing this national problem as the problem of a person, or of an office, or of an officer, because the criminals love that. No, they would love that. But just think of what I just told you. A few thousand people, a few thousand people who have managed to arm themselves. And it doesn't require an equal number of guns, because the criminals create their own business. And as fast as the law or the government or the police try to stop it, they find another avenue. One gun, one firearm, a handgun or an assault weapon, being rotated in a crowd, rented out in some instances, protected by a family and handing out to the killers. One gun could be as effective as 100 guns in the hands of 100 people, because it's rotating in the population. That is going on. And of course, I am not here today to go into the details of our criminal experience, because we all live it and the exposure that we have to criminal conduct. But I just want you to understand that when you talk about a state of emergency, it is targeting that 0.5% or less than 0.5% of the population who have chosen to go down that road for benefit, for profit, or for revenge. What we were dealing with on Friday night is information that retaliatory actions of the type that we've seen at Prisgalan is what is more than likely to occur in the days to flow. The government has acted and has acted decisively. And the matter is now in the hands of the police officers and all the security agencies that are on the state's payroll. We don't look to the teachers, the doctors, the nurses, or the priests to do that. That is the job. And I want to also point out that as they do this job, they put their lives on the line. And for the uncaring ones who don't have a caring word to say about them, I want you for the moment, just think about them, their families and their children when they go out there to confront these killers. Just think about them as they do that, as you make your statements, some of which are quite ridiculous. They put their lives on the line, standing in the breach between you and those who have decided by their own intellect, by their own selfishness, to disregard the law. And of course, we're not surprised that there are those who will seek to create loopholes for them in the law, because we saw it during COVID. We went to court 65 times to protect the doctors and nurses because they were being sued left, right, and center, and the government had to go all the way to the Privy Council. They took a Privy Council ruling that the government was right to act in a particular way, because we had people in our society who believed that everything the government does is wrong or everything the government does is stupid, but that's par for the course. I will stop at this point so that you may ask a few questions on this subject of the state of emergency. Members of the media, you're free to ask a few questions. I'll allow up to about 2 questions per person, so that will have a lot of questions here in Tobago. And I know who's going to ask the first one.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Elizabeth Williams, TV6, I-95.5, and the Express newspaper.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. In terms of the SOE, I know you spoke at length. What is your view with respect to the legal challenge at this time? Because there is a legal challenge.
We don't have a problem. Our society is still a society under law. And if any citizen believes that his or her rights are being infringed, then they are free to do so. And the government has a duty to get appropriate, top quality legal support in the courts to defend the public interest. And that will be done at every instance.
Mr. Prime Minister, in light of the recent, on the 31st of December, the assassination of the attorney, Mr. Hector, some persons are saying, or in the opposition, and some citizens are saying, why the SOE? Because even though we are under a state of emergency, that assassination took place, where was the information and the protection of prosecutors and persons of that caliber?
Well, I think if you think about it, it is possible, even as I'm speaking here now, while you sitting there next to me, it's possible that there could be somebody somewhere planning to execute an action against you to harm you. That's possible. It would be quite far-fetched to tell you that anybody who's thinking about doing any such thing would automatically be known to the police. Understood? So when you make that statement that the police should have known, that is not a statement that can stand real good scrutiny. On the instance, I have no information that the police did know and did not act. And to say that the police should have known is just carrying it a little far. We expect that if that is happening and we get information to that effect, that you treat it as information upon which you might want to act or should act. But let me get to the point. What it does, as you raise the question in the context of it being said that how could that happen in a state of emergency, that is the point I have just made. That the criminal element that is hell-bent on executing those kinds of lawless actions do not pay any attention to the state of the law or what the law says. Because if the law has been modified and is said to be specifically aimed at these criminal actions, and you then carry out an action like that, it should tell the population about what the criminals are prepared to do. And just having the law does not in itself suppress that thought and that action. That's what it is. That is the proof. So what is being said is, unless you are able to go further and on the basis of information or even suspicion, you are able to stop that person or remove the offending weapon, then the action of the criminal will proceed to that outcome. This is a very serious development in Trinidad and Tobago, but it is not something that has not happened before. I want to point out to you, former Attorney General Selwyn Richardson was assassinated in this country, and up to this day, government come, government go, nobody knows who did it or what the motive was, but it was done. We also have been told and have experienced many instances of witnesses being harmed or killed. This is the criminal element saying, I am not prepared to subject myself to being restrained in the prison, where prison sentence is meant to be the response after you are convicted, or I'm not prepared to have any lawyer stand up in the court and put up any case against me. And of course, knowing that if you remove one lawyer, there are other lawyers who could stand in there, that's not what you have. I am prepared to put fear into the hearts of those who may replace the one that I have removed. And therefore, this is fair as a protection for the criminal. The question now, is the society sufficiently strong together and resolute to prevent that fear from handing victory to the criminals who think that way? I want to say to all the officers of state today, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the government of Trinidad and Tobago will provide all the reasonable support to all the officers of state to ensure that the rule of law prevails in Trinidad and Tobago. That is a commitment of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to say to the officers who are so threatened, wherever you are, take comfort in the fact that we've done this before successfully. When we had an outbreak of COVID, in the very early days of COVID, when the world didn't know anything more than there was a virus that would kill you once it takes a hold of you, our health officers, doctors and nurses, stayed on the wards, close to patients, saw people dying, not understanding the details of the infection, but they stayed the course for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I hold that out to every officer as representing the resilience of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. With respect to the SOE, some persons are worried in terms of officers being now able to enter homes without warrants, that there are criminals who also have uniforms of police officers or impersonating police officers that are able to also enter their homes. Your view on this?
Well, my view is that the leadership of the police service should do and must do and continue to do everything possible to minimize and remove those possibilities. Again, if I may make another example to you, very many of us may have a situation where you have to take a medication, and you do so sometimes weighing the risks, because many medications have side effects. You don't say, I will not take it in every instance because it has a side effect. You weigh the risk. And if the side effect is so great, you may not want to use it. On the other hand, if your ailment is so great, even though you know the side effects, you would take it and take the chance. That's the same kind of risk. Because if we say that we will not give the police officers, the vast majority of whom are decent law-abiding officers, if we're not going to give them that extra leg up over the criminals because a few of their colleagues might misbehave and might hurt one or two citizens, if that's what we're going to say, I think we would have been giving the criminals the benefit. Today I want to appeal to the decent, law-abiding police officers of all ranks to not tolerate within the ranks of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service officers who are unfit for the job that they hold. The same way you say to the public, if you see something, say something. I would say to the officers themselves today, if you know something, say something. Because those handful of officers to whom the reference is made, they are just as unwanted in this society as the criminal with the gun. Because the effect of such an officer destroying the trust of the population in the police service prevents the public from cooperating in sharing vital information with the police. Because we have 8,000 police officers. It is mathematically and logistically impossible for 8,000 officers to close mark 1.3 million people to be there at the time when a criminal challenges you. So to say the police should have done the police, they're not magicians. They work hard, as they should. They would need help in the form of information and cooperation. And if rogue officers destroy that trust as they have been doing, then it makes the work of the police officers harder, and it even puts their lives at risk. So do not tolerate rogue officers in the ranks. You know how to get information to the authorities, and you know the same way you're asking people to say something and do it with security of handing over the information. You should be able to do that within the police service about your colleagues and help us to clean up the police service so that in situations like these, the public wouldn't have that overriding concern that giving police this power. And not only the police, this state of emergency has added a large number of other state personnel to that fight. The Defense Force personnel are now to act with the powers of police officers. Whereas before, they would go on a patrol and they would have one police officer with the patrol to ensure that the law is covered, but the soldiers were not police officers. The state of emergency gives that power for intervention because we deem it necessary at this time. It is temporary. That's another one of the arguments from some people, that it is not going to be the end, the be-all and end-all of the fight against crime. But nobody's saying that. Nobody is saying that this is going to be the end of any action we take. A whole series of other actions will continue well beyond the life of any state of emergency.
I was going to ask that question, Mr. Prime Minister, in terms of long-term, knowing that the SOE is temporary, in terms of long-term strategy going forward. And also, if you could care to also answer with respect to travel advisories against this country, one from the U.S. Embassy, etc. Are you worried about these travel advisories?
We've had travel advisories all the time from the United States and from other places. Again, we can't tell countries how to communicate with their population. Those advisories are aimed at their population in our community. One could say that if we were in the business of issuing travel advisories based on what Al Jazeera says or what we would tell people not to go to Louisiana. I mean, look at what happened there. I mean, and that is only one of many that happens virtually on a daily basis. The violent crime is a constant across our populations, and we don't really spend time You know, if we find an advisory make reference to something which is inaccurate, in being specific, we talk, and there are channels through which we talk these matters. But other than that, we shouldn't be distracted by that. We understand what it means. It means that people are being told that, you know, things are happening, so be alert. And within our own population, we do the same thing, you know. There are things that if you are really concerned about your personal safety or the family safety, given the behavior of some of our population, you would know what to do and not to do. Huh? In terms of trying to give yourself a chance to not be a victim of the criminal element, because a lot of it is opportunistic. So if you give them the opportunity, they will do certain things that may not happen if the opportunity doesn't present itself. So let's not be distracted by that. You know, so there was well, that is why the state of emergency, by its very nature in the law, has a short term. You have to go to the parliament on Monday, which is required by law, having had a proclamation of this nature at the behest of the government through the office of the president. We have 15 days within which to go to the parliament, because as I said, we still maintain that we are going to be a country under law. So even as we remove certain rights, it is not done willy-nilly. The law is written that we must now go to the parliament, be examined there. It must be put before the public as to what has happened, and of course, we have to convince the parliament, because if the parliament is not convinced, then it ends. And then if the parliament gives an extension, it goes to an extended period, and after 3 months, if you want a further extension, you have to come back to the parliament. And then it doesn't go beyond 6 months in total. So fear not. We are not changing the foundation of our jurisprudence or permanently removing the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens. Desperate circumstances have caused us to take this action. And it's an action that is provided for under law in no other place but the Constitution. Those handful of people who have chosen that way of life and is taking that kind of action within our population, they have brought that upon this nation, and the government will not hesitate upon decision that this is a good time to do it, that we do it knowing that it's not something that's going to last forever. And having said that, we expect that our security officers will make full use of this period to extract as much as they can from the criminal element. That's the purpose.
Afternoon, Prime Minister. Natalie Singh, Channel 5. You mentioned the tribunal. I was just wondering if you can elaborate on it and how it works and who is appointed and when it goes into effect and things like that.
Okay. Well, the tribunal has been appointed. It's like a court. And I don't want to play lawyer. I will stay away from that. The Attorney General will talk about that a little later on. But how it is, the law requires that 3 persons appointed by the Chief Justice. And those 3 persons, I think, are people of high legal competence, judges, that level of person, and they will hear, a provision is made in the law for person or persons who have been detained under the powers of this act to complain. If they have a complaint about what is happening to them, they make that complaint to this tribunal, and the tribunal acts as a court and rules on the complaint as to whether they are in fact being disadvantaged under the law.
So then how does a person differentiate between, has my rights been interfered with if I had the police break down my door and the defense force behind them? How do I differentiate that in a state of emergency?
Well, I don't know that again, I don't want to play lawyer. You're talking about the person whose door has been broken down. I'm not sure if that qualifies to go before the tribunal, but what I do know is that a person who has lost his or her right, freedom, like a detainee, that person can go to the tribunal. Other than that, the rest of the country's laws remain in force. the state of emergency does not vitiate any of our other laws. It creates powers which the security services otherwise would not have had by removing certain requirements for them to do certain things.
How many are usually on a tribunal of this nature?
There are 3 persons.
Right. So,
One, a chairman and 2 others.
have you selected, or do you have names?
Not me.
Oh,
That is done by the Chief Justice.
yeah. Okay.
The same way the proclamation is done by the President, the protection for the detainees,
Oh, yes.
done by the Chief Justice. He will appoint in his or her own power and own right 3 people, a 3-person panel, to look at what is happening with respect to persons whose rights have been abridged.
How does putting the country in a state of emergency, how does that impact on our reputation to the international community and the regional community? Have they expressed concern? Are the leaders expressed concern as what is going on in Trinidad?
Well, it is not something that is unknown to the world. As a matter of fact, in one Caribbean country, they have, in the last couple of years, have declared a number of states of emergencies. So, and they've done it in a way trying to minimize the effect on the rest of the country. It has been that approach, which has been offered to us here in Trinidad and Tobago, has been struck down by the law of that country, and it is being appealed. So while the government has tried to do it, it is under appeal in the country there. And I can tell you for sure, other CARICOM leaders are not surprised, because they too are facing the same kinds of onslaught from their own criminal element. We would have preferred not to do that. As I said earlier on, no government likes to have to do that, because people wake up in the morning and they heard that Trinidad and Tobago is under a state of emergency. They might have a view as to what that means in the country. And I mean, if you were planning to go, we talk about our tourism here in Tobago. If you were abroad and planning and you threw darts at the board and you say, okay, we're going to go to Tobago, and you hear that Tobago is under a state of emergency, that alone, just that piece of news, you don't really want to know the details of it, and and to say, well, all right, I'm satisfied that it's a good place I could still go to. Just the fact that it has a state of emergency, you might just switch to another place that doesn't have one. It might even be more dangerous than Tobago, but you switch to another place. So we would have wanted to avoid that. But fortunately, that literally dies down after a few days when it becomes clearer to the international community what is meant by a state of emergency. Because state of emergency could come in for all kinds of reasons. It could be a change of government, an overthrow of government. It could be, all kinds of things. So you want to know a little bit more. And I think as the information comes out, people will get to see that it is something that doesn't really stop our day-to-day operations, but is focusing on the criminal element that poses a threat not only to local people, but to tourists who come amongst us. So we are in fact improving our situation.
Did the country take too long to implement a state of emergency?
It all depends on who you talk to.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Candace Jackson, Tobago Updates. My first question is in regard to a concern from some officers throughout that there's been a shortage of equipment. Some of them, they are concerned about shortage of PPEs and so on as they go into some of these dangerous situations. Is there any more provision being made so that officers are well equipped to handle these dangerous situations?
Well, as we delayed getting to the point of a state of emergency, I said earlier on, we have done a number of things, one of which is to ensure that our agencies, police in particular, are properly resourced, and you would have seen that in the budgeting process and in the acquisition process, and you would have seen what we have been doing all along. I mean, there's always room for improvement. You need more money, you need more this, you need more that, but that's an ongoing operation. What has to be done now is not belly aching about this, that, and the other. It is getting on with the job with what we have. That's what I expect to happen now.
Okay, and there's also a concern that this SOE is being used as perhaps an excuse for some to exercise abuse of power, or to be able to act in ways to attack, I don't know, perhaps political opponents and so on. What do you have to say to this concern?
I don't know that the police have any political opponent. This law, this act, this power is a power given to the police. It gives no superior authority to anybody in the cabinet or in the political party or so. So that argument has no real basis in a society like Trinidad and Tobago, where we have operations of political entities that do not control the police, nor do they control the political process outside of what is there under the law. So that is just, I've heard even members of parliament talking that foolishness. But that is just they have an opportunity to say something, they have nothing useful to say, so they talk that.
And also earlier when you were speaking, you were addressing the concern of the Coast Guard officers, and you said that we are closer, or that there's been significant strides being made, because there continues to be a concern that our borders are being left porous.
Again, that is now a cliche, right? That's a cliche. We have occupancy of a number of islands, 2 main islands, Trinidad and Tobago, and every spot along our coastline is a potential entry point for persons wanting to get into our country. So from that standpoint, you could say it's porous. In response to that, we maintain at significant cost and effort covering that perimeter around us in the open ocean, in the close inshore waters, at our ports and so on. And to do that, we have a number of marine assets, where, as you know, once you're in the sea, maintenance is a huge problem for things that go in the sea or even close to the sea. We've had significant issues with that, and all of them require ongoing maintenance, an area which we have not distinguished ourselves. But we have in recent times made a lot of effort in ensuring that we do better in maintaining these craft, and I can tell you today we do have our main crafts in rotation. We have significant repairs taking place in Suriname, vessels coming from Suriname which has been repaired, vessels going to Suriname for repairs. The intention is to make as high a percentage as possible of availability of those craft that we have already purchased. That is going on full pace, and alongside everything else that we are doing, not the least of which is gathering information, which is commonly called intelligence, on who's doing what with respect to criminal planning and criminal execution.
Would you be able to elaborate on how many vessels do we have up and running at this point?
I will not, because that is assisting persons who would look for loopholes in our security.
Pleasant afternoon. Kavisia Douglas, TTT Limited. Just zeroing in on the topic of tourism and the impact. Of course, Tobago thrives on tourism, and you touched on it. Of course, when people hear SOA, they think curfew, they think things are going to cut off at a certain time, but that's not the case this time around. However, some tourists may still be concerned because, the actions are targeted to specific persons. However, in these areas, maybe where they're staying, these specific persons may be within these areas. What words of assurance or reassurance you would give that we focused on these persons, and we're going to consider the fact that you will not be affected while we carry out these actions?
Well, we don't know the full range of actions that criminals are thinking about. So let us not pretend that we have that kind of information. You're driving on the road, there could be a criminal looking at your vehicle, you're going into the mall, you go to a restaurant, you're in your hotel room. As a matter of fact, once you are there, they look for opportunities to distress you. That's a fact. And that is common not only to Trinidad and Tobago, but common to all of us everywhere. You go abroad, you lock your hotel room. Doesn't matter how safe your city is, right? And of course, you are asked not to wear and display chains and jewelry and so on. That is so that you don't create opportunities. Same thing here. But what we'll say, in answer to your question, is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago in Trinidad and in Tobago, those officers whose job it is on the state's payroll to protect you. They are on the job and they're going 100% to ensure that you are given the protection that you require as you live in these environments, either as a local or as a visitor. We are under law and we use the law to protect the public, and we also keep an eye on the criminal element, because we can't say we don't have them in our country. We have them in our country, and we try to suppress their behavior.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rowley. Elizabeth Gonzalez from Guardian Media. There's the belief that the government probably would have dragged its foot in declaring this SOE, and had the government probably declared the SOE earlier, hundreds of lives would have been saved. What is your response to that? Because we would have known who the repeated offenders are. We would have known about the illegal firearms and the drug blocks and all of that. So people are asking, why so late?
Well, that is a point of view that some people will have. It is not the government's point of view. Here it is. You were saying that the government dragged its feet. I tried to explain to you early on that the option was always available. But the effect of the option, right, was something that the government was concerned about, so we did not choose it as a first option. There were other things that we did. The escalation and the threat at the time when it was used demanded that we no longer be that cautious. So there was no dragging of any feet. It's a decision-making exercise. And there were, the same way you were telling me here about dragging feet, there were people with louder voices than you earlier on saying, we do not want a state of emergency because it will cause so and so and so, right? But of course, such persons can change their position very frequently. It is only the government that is held to a position on these matters. Understand? Because the government, you have one government in the country. You have one officer prime minister, you have one prime minister. That is where the decisions can be made. Because you will have some people saying yes to it and some saying no to it. You will have some saying no, it is timely and warranted, and you'll have some saying that it should have been done a long time ago. And of course, if, as one lady said a while ago, it is only for a short time. If it was there a long time ago, that short time would have come and gone a long time, you know. And we may very well be having the second state of emergency. These are possibilities. Because once you have it, there's no guarantee that at the end of it, criminal intent in the minds of people in Trinidad and Tobago will disappear, you know. We have to make sure that the state is in a position to discharge that responsibility to the population, which is to provide it with safety and security, even as criminal elements within the society keep changing, looking for opportunities, changing their modus, arming themselves differently. As we are concerned now, at one point in time, criminals were armed with knives and cutlass. Then they were armed with pistols, revolvers that shot 6. Then they were armed with handguns that could carry 15 shots. Now they're arming themselves with, and if you give them half a chance, they'll arm themselves with a bazooka. That's what they will do. And the state has to be in a position to respond, but to respond proportionately as we go forward.
We are on day 5 of since the declaration was made. What are you being told with regards to the success of the SOE thus far? And are you satisfied?
I'm satisfied with the effort that is being made. I receive continuous reports from the various sectors of what's involved, but it's too early to make a declaration as to what is happening. The fact that it's happening, I'm optimistic that the security officers will do better under this situation, because if that is not so, then what we're being told, or we're being told by the police that we need this, we need that, we need the other, then it has now been proven not to be correct. But I don't expect that will be so.
There are calls for the Commissioner of Police, well, once again, to be fired. I know in the past you have defended her, and considering the murder toll in 2024, do you still stand by that point, not only to defend the Commissioner, but also to defend the National Security Minister?
Let me point out something to you and all those who have that point of view. I as Prime Minister of this country, might be the only person in this country who does not have the option to not support the Commissioner of Police. Doesn't matter who he or she is. Doesn't matter what other issues might be going down. I am required to support the Commissioner of Police, who is in office. And let me ask you another question. Suppose you see me trying to fire the Commissioner of Police. How many pages you want in the Guardian to print how interfering the Prime Minister is? Tell me. The same person who is training you up there to say, fire the Commissioner of Police and the Prime Minister should do that. That same page, that same person is saying, don't talk to the Commissioner of Police because you're interfering and we have separation of powers and all kind of nonsense. And they'll compare here with El Salvador, where the president in El Salvador decided to lock up everybody with a tattoo or anybody who said they know somebody with a tattoo. We can't do that in Trinidad and Tobago. What we have agreed to be governed by is a suite of laws that doesn't allow that. We don't have an executive president who has that range of power to do something like that. In New York, the mayor can fire the Commissioner of Police summarily in his office. And by the same token, the Commissioner of Police can call a lieutenant in and take his badge, you're dismissed. That cannot happen in Trinidad and Tobago under our laws. And even when we talk about changing the law, we're not talking about changing it to that. So what we have agreed to do is to exist within a suite of laws that does give the criminals a fair and too much of a fair chance to succeed. And you see what happens when you try to change the law? As the criminals started to coalesce into gangs, we go to the parliament. You saw the rigmarole in this country to get an anti-gang act passed. And even after it was passed in the parliament, where all the parliamentarians agree how the law should be shaped, it goes to the court. And then the police can't act because the court is saying, we don't agree that this is how it should be. And it was tweaked. There's the Justice Bureau tweaking, and you would have heard the commissioner make reference to the police thinking that even as we have the law, it's not as straightforward as that. So these are constraints of the democratic society of Trinidad and Tobago. And many people who make comments outside of those considerations. So the Commissioner of Police is not open to be fired by the Prime Minister. So even though you don't like the Commissioner, don't look to the Prime Minister to fire. And I tell you something else too. In 1962, this problem was created. It was called Government by Service Commission. There's a service commission that stands between the cabinet, the government, and the Commissioner of Police. And therefore, for the Commissioner of Police to have been hired, Prime Minister couldn't hire the best person or the best woman or the best man for the job. We had to be guided by what the Service Commission put before the Parliament. And of course, you could say we chose the wrong person, but that's the work of the Commission. But once you go in the job, the government has a duty to support the person in that job.
But Dr. Rowley, are you pleased with her performance thus far?
I am not marking the Commissioner's performance on a press conference, except to say to you, right, that we are all required, as it was said in times like these in the British Empire, England expects every man and woman to do his or her duty. We will do well to adopt that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rowley, Corey Connolly, Newsday. There have been...
Corey, I like the fact that you give way to all the ladies' talks, all the actors. and then you're a real Tobago man, right?
You mentioned the SOE as being a particular response to a situation, and you outlined the situation. But over the years, outside of the SOE, there have been several anti-crime operations. I remember Operation Anaconda and a few subsequent to that, that targeted specific at-risk communities. Outside of that, Professor Selwyn Ryan, I believe, Professor Ravis Deusaran, they did studies in at-risk communities regarding the crime situation. And I'm wondering, because there's a feeling that the government over the years has been putting plasters on sores rather than getting to the root cause of the crime situation. How do you feel about that? What is your position on that?
Well, there are many teeth that have more than one root. And the worst time to start to build a fire station is when the fire is blazing. What we're dealing with here now cannot be dealt with by saying, like, go to the school and start to teach you how to behave, or change in the society. These are outcomes that require attention. And of course, that does not remove the requirement to make changes in the society. I see it being said that the education system required to be changed, because people go to different places for explanations and comfort. Some people blame the education system. Some blame parenting. Some blame the fact that people are without godliness. So all of these things, a portion of it might be true. And there's no one way of focusing on what needs to be done to bring about the citizen who will choose not to try to live off crime and criminality. So there's not an exclusion, but in dealing with the situation that is in front of you, right, you can't excuse that and not do it because you're now going to go and start to try to treat with the root cause. The root cause is being treated with on different days in different ways. I mean, look at how much this particular government, only this one, I'm talking about the last one and the one before and the one before, this government, look at how much effort we have put into youth programs. Youth programs. Create a ministry of youth development, spending millions in creating opportunities, encouraging young people back into a number of areas, from driving tractor to planting vegetables, and funding them to become entrepreneurs. That's only one of the responses. Inside the school system, I, for one, believe that our curriculum needs to be revised, right? So that a certain amount of civic preparation should be prepared. Getting 14 O-levels and not being prepared to be a citizen, you're not properly educated. That's my view, but I'm not the expert. But if it hasn't happened, maybe it's going to happen. But it's a whole series of threads that have to be woven into a fabric to get success.
What are you hoping will be the outcome of this particular SOE?
The outcome that I'm hoping for is a significant suppression of gun violence in Trinidad and Tobago. That's what I'm hoping for. And I am expecting that the police service and its support agencies, the Defense Force, the Coast Guard, the SSA, all those whose job it is to feed into that. I mean, I did say earlier on, it is not a large number of citizens as compared to the rest of the population, but their effect infects and affects all of us. So spare thought for the police officers whose lives are on the line, but also hold them to perform, right? And it doesn't augur well if the approach to this requirement is to tell me about what you have and where you have. I want to see a can-do attitude. Okay, so that's it for that.
Not yet, no. No. Not yet, Mr. Prime Minister, sorry.
Liz, your phone will go on for the whole evening.
I know,
where
but
you receive questions from the whole world.
Yes,
I don't have the whole evening.
I know.
You're allowed one more question on the subject.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I will try to squeeze in two, but one of them just now, no.
See what I mean?
I'm going to squeeze in two, right? Just two.
That phone can go on for the whole night.
No. I know my phone is running, but still, I'll just squeeze in two, right?
Okay, I'll take two from you and I'll take one from you at the back and then we move on.
Right, nice. Thank you. So what I wanted to know from you, Mr. Prime Minister, how are you coping? Our condolences on the passing of your brother, your dear brother. How are you coping in terms of running a country but yet grieving at the same time? That's just one of the two.
I used to have a boss, an Englishman, who was amazed at our culture where we have these large families. And he would say, when you all have families as large as that, you have to expect interventions as frequently as that. I'm coping. It's a little heartbreaking. Actually, I lost a brother earlier in the year, and this is the second one. And these things are, even though he was ailing, at the passing, you're never ready for that. So, but I don't want to bring that into the management of public affairs. I have to do what I have to do. And I thank all of you. I've had a tremendous outpouring of support, both from people here in Tobago and all around the people I work with and so on. And I appreciate that because it helps you get through the night and through the day. So thanks for asking.
Just on my second question, which you did allow me, with respect to the SOE, would you say in terms of there was a leak in terms of via WhatsApp before the government made the announcement? Are you worried about these leaks?
Well, if you're running a government, right, that is where should I put it? There's very little that the government can keep away from the public for too long. So if there was a leak, what has been leaked has been legal and it was meant for the public consumption. So maybe they got to consume it before the government put it on the plate. But leaks in government or around government, that's pretty standard. In fact, in some cases, it's a part of the machinery of communication. What is worrisome is when there's misinformation, leak or no leak. The public's concern, am I getting accurate information or is this misinformation? And I want to give the assurance that the government will continue in a very timely manner to provide accurate information and clarification as we go forward. Okay, you have your two questions and then we move on.
Please. Right. Your party is supposed to have a retreat sometime this month.
You've ended it. Thank you very much. So we've ended
what
this.
aspect of country is supposed to be discussed at that, if at all, anything?
So you are ending, as I attempted to do, to end the discussion on the whole question of the state of emergency. We're moving on to what now? Go ahead.
Your party is supposed to have a retreat this month. What aspects of country are to be placed in that?
Yes, we had by prior planning, as part of my stay in Tobago, tomorrow we have part of the ongoing screening process. We screen the Tobago candidates tomorrow, and then the parliamentary aspect of the government would meet in Tobago on Sunday and Monday, where we will review what we have done, what we are doing, and 2025 is a very important year. It is definitely an election year, as you would know. Half of that election year is gone. The other half is still in front of us because the parliament dissolves at the end of August, as you know. And of course, if that's the case, then you have 90 days beyond that by which an election must be called, and the population gets involved to determine who manages the affairs of the country. But that's a good point for me to say that I'll be in Tobago for a few days doing that. But there's something else I want to say, because the public, some people have issues when the public is not very clear on some business that is not in front of them at this time. But I think the time has come for me to put some business before the country. And it's this. I'm a Tobagoan, as you all know. And this is as good a place as ever for me to have this conversation or make this comment. You would see invariably either my colleagues or myself, we're under relentless attack from particular people. Many of them never plant a okra seed in this country, never sweep a foot of pavement, never plant a tree. But they're relentlessly attacking people who work in public life and who contribute to national development. And they do it with hate and vitriol. Unfortunately, that's what it is. But for me, it wasn't always so. It wasn't always so. I could see a deterioration in the quality of our society, fueled by the availability of the mechanism to spread your bile, absence of certain kinds of civilities, and of course, more me than us. So at this time in my life, I want to say that I've been in Tobago. My first job here on a payroll was to plant grass at Hope Estate. And that was on public payroll, I mean, because I was in the juicy factory before, putting bottles in cases. But on the public payroll, I was there planting grass at Hope Estate when we moved the estate from Scarborough to Hope. I've seen the country progress. Okay, that time I got $7 a day. The same person now probably is a millionaire. But after that, I taught school in Tobago. And then I entered the political arena in 1980. This year would be 45 years that I've been in public life in Trinidad and Tobago. I've offered myself for service in Tobago in 1981 and in Trinidad from 1991. Well, from 1987, January actually, when I served in the Senate, to now. And at the last election, 2020, when I announced the PNM victory in Balizé House, I said to this country, I will not be doing that again. And I meant it, and I've kept it. I've also said that I've brought into the political arena a number of young people who had served at that time one term. Many of them are still in government, about to complete their second term, experienced, some of them with 9 or 10 years approximately of service in the government. So the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago have a cadre of people, mainly young people, who came into public service with all its warts and have prepared themselves to take this country forward. I had the experience of managing this country through COVID. Only today I was happy to receive on the way here a PAHO clearance from a concern that up to last night there was a concern that there was another outbreak of a COVID-type virus in China. The international agency has just confirmed to us that there's no need to worry and that the story about an emergency in China, state of emergency in China, is not correct. I was particularly pleased to hear that because God knows we don't want to go through another COVID. So I'm here with my colleagues this weekend, and one of the things that they will be told is that I will not be offering myself again to represent anyone, either in Trinidad or in Tobago. 45 years is a long time. And I would like at this time to say thank you appropriately along the way to all those who have supported my effort and to have benefited from, I hope, I would have positively impacted this country somewhere, sometime. As we settle Tobago screening tomorrow, I continue to be the political leader of the PNM. We will call for nominations in the other seats where I represent the people of Diego Martin West, who have supported me resolutely from 1991 to now. And I will thank them appropriately and ensure that they are not left adrift. But I will not be offering myself, as I just said. And I'll say something else. Before the end of the legal limits of this term, I will resign this office and go off to my family. Thank you all very much, and see you again sometime soon.